Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry. Corey Sirota is off today. Coming right up on the first half of today's show, she teaches FBI agents how to detect and recover human remains. Kathy Reichs is a world-renowned forensic anthropologist who has brought her vast work experience to the screen and as a best-selling author of forensic thrillers. In fact, her latest novel called The Bone Code is just being released, and we have Kathy that will be joining us very shortly. Thanks for joining me here on Life Unrehearsed on a relatively cool Saturday, and as you just heard, it's going to be a little warmer and sunnier tomorrow. On the second half of today's show, you'll want to stick around as I talk to Julie Chu. Julie's a former four-time Olympian on Team USA women's hockey team, and Julie's married to Carolyn Ouellette, who's another star hockey player on the Canadian women's hockey team, having won gold medals at 4 Olympic Winter Games. And Julie and Carolyn are married. They have 2 beautiful young daughters, and they're living right here in Montreal. We're going to hear from Julie Chu right after the 3:30 news. All right. Kathy Reichs, she's a #1 New York Times and international best-selling author and a forensic anthropologist. Her first novel, Deja Dead, won the Ellis Award for Best First Novel. Kathy was also a producer of Fox Television's longest-running scripted drama called Bones, which is based on her work and her novels. Kathy is one of the very few forensic anthropologists certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. Kathy divides her time between Charlotte, North Carolina, and right here in Montreal, Quebec. Kathy, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, thanks for joining us. Very excited to have you on the show. And for our listeners, I'd like to go back to your early years where you had some humble beginnings, I believe, in Chicago, correct?
I was born in Chicago, in the city of Chicago, in a South Side, very Irish neighborhood. I lived there till I was about 11, and then we moved. My father was transferred, and we moved to the Twin Cities. So I lived just south of St. Paul until high school, and then we returned to the Chicago area, and I finished my last couple of years of high school there.
All right, and there is some connection later on in your postgraduate year in around the Chicago area, but your primary work is anthropology and forensic anthropology. Such a fascinating field. For in layman's terms, Kathy, what is a forensic anthropologist?
Well, we're biological anthropologists who specialize in the human skeleton. And instead of excavating ancient remains, archaeologically recovered remains, we work for medical examiners and law enforcement and the coroners. And we help identify unidentifiable remains, remains that might be burned or mutilated or mummified or dismembered or decomposed, or maybe they're just bones. So we figure out who it could be. We also figure out manner or cause of death, what happened to the person. We might be asked to figure out how long they've been dead. We might be asked to help recover human remains. So that's basically what we do.
Listening to Life Unrehearsed, Matt Del Vecchio, and we have Kathy Reichs on the line, best-selling author and forensic anthropologist. The latest book will soon be released called The Bone Code, which we're going to talk a little bit more. Kathy, I have to ask, it's such a unique niche, such a really interesting field. How did you get interested in this?
Well, one aspect of osteology, the study of the human skeleton, is to do the biological archaeology end of it. And that's what I started out in. And that's what I was doing very happily in my lab way back in the gray dawn of history. I'm not going to tell you how far back that was. But I described this in a short story I wrote called First Bones. And it's Tempe's origin story, and it's also my origin story. Cops came to my lab, and they wanted help with a case. The remains of a child had been discovered. She'd been missing several months, and they wanted to know if I could help verify that this is, in fact, the missing child. So I did that case, and I really found it compelling. And I went back, I retrained, I sat for my board certification exam, and I've been doing the forensic end of it ever since.
It's just amazing. And you did complete your master's, I believe, and PhD in physical anthropology at Northwestern, didn't you?
That is correct.
And I guess you love school so much, Kathy. You really do have an academic career. Can you give us just a little snippet of all the teachings you have done in your time?
Well, I've taught at a number of institutions, but primarily my longest stretch and where I attained tenure and was promoted to the level of full professor was the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. But I also taught at both McGill and Concordia University in Montreal, and that would be I spent one full year on an exchange, a faculty exchange, teaching at Concordia, and then I taught offload courses at McGill and continued to do that for many, many years. And it was during that time that the Laboratoire de Sciences Judiciaires and de Medicine Légale needed a forensic anthropologist, and I was the only one there, and I could work in French, and so that's when I started working for that facility.
So there is the Montreal connection, and I believe you became the only certified French-speaking forensic anthropologist in North America. Congratulations for that. And quite interesting. So it says, that you do share your time between North Carolina and Montreal. And is it because of your teaching that you're here in Montreal, or is there lab work as well?
Initially, it was the teaching, and then eventually it evolved to be both teaching and lab work, and then it evolved to primarily just flying back and forth in order to do the forensic casework.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Talking with Kathy Reichs, you've probably read one of Kathy's books. She's launching her 20th in her series of books, and the latest one is called The Bone Code. And, I want to talk a little bit about your whole life of teaching and very much involved in forensic anthropology, even teaching FBI agents how to detect and recover human remains. And then you took a very big leap in the world of being an author and writing a book. In fact, your first novel in 1997 called Déjà Dead, it went right away to the New York Times bestseller, and it was eventually published in 22 languages, a bestseller in the U.S., Canada, and the United Kingdom, and sold more than 1 million copies. This is your first book, Kathy. It also won the Arthur Ellis Award for Best First Novel and is considered one of the best first crime novels ever. However, you weren't exactly in your comfort zone at that time, were you?
Well, I certainly didn't know much about writing fiction. I had to, make it up as I went along. I was just trying to write the kind of book that I like to read. Is that what you're getting at? I'm not sure.
Yeah, because, your life is I would imagine you had to go a little bit of soul searching and say, hey, I'm going to write a novel, but it just can't come like that after so much of your work being in the labs and doing forensic work and taking a shot at a novel, and it just explodes on you.
Well, that's true. I never anticipated that I'd be sitting here today talking about my 20th book in the series. When you write your first novel and you've never done fiction and you're a completely unknown author, and most of the world has never heard of your subject matter. My main character is a forensic anthropologist. What is that? You just hope, you'll finish the book and that it'll be good enough that someone will publish it and that people will read it and they will like it. That was my greatest aspiration when I was writing it.
Something else. And Temperance Brennan, of course, has been your main character in all the series of books. And I can't imagine. You have published a book on average almost once every year to year and a half. As you mentioned, you're on number 20 here in this series. And we're working, going way back now to 97 when you first launched it. How did you find time to manage the time of writing and working?
Well, that became difficult because I also had 3 kids and was doing the commuting and was teaching a full load at university and flying back and forth to Montreal doing the casework. And it got to the point several years down the road that I was also writing a young adult series with my son, the Tori Brennan books, and I was writing a screenplay every year for the TV series. So it just got really kind of overwhelming. And it's at that point I decided I had to pull back on something. And that's when I eased back from the casework and began to focus on the writing.
Yeah, talking with Kathy Reichs here, forensic anthropologist and novelist as well. You talked about your writing with Brendan, your son. I actually wanted to ask you about this. You had a series, I think, aimed at young adults that you co-authored with your son called, was it Virals? Is that correct?
It was the Viral series. It featured Temperance Brennan's 14-year-old great niece, Tori Brennan, and her 3 best friends who were boys. And it was because my son is a lawyer, and he hated being a lawyer. He did it for all of 2 years, I think. And he came to me with this proposal because he noticed that at my signings and my public events, parents would ask, is it okay if my child reads your Temperance Brennan books? And I'd say, well, how old is she? And they would say, she's 7, and I'd say, no, it's definitely not okay to read these. But kids were interested in forensics, so we thought we would create a female role model for a younger audience, and, solving problems using science and using investigative techniques. And that's what the Viral series is all about.
I think that's so smart. It's expanding your audience. It must have been quite the experience working with your son as well, and I'm sure very proud of that. And I'm sure you had some very interesting times co-authoring that together.
We had some very interesting, creative meetings, editorial meetings.
We'll go with the creative meetings, right? Oh boy, Kathy, we have to head out to traffic for a quick little update here. When we come back with Kathy Reichs, forensic anthropologist, you were very much involved as one of the producers in a fantastic TV series on Fox called Bones. In fact, 12 seasons. So if you don't mind, we're going to go for a quick little traffic update, Kathy, but we want to hear all about that.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Flora Lee Senior Residences. Always there for you. Safe, reassuring, and comforting. We call it home.
We're talking to the legendary forensic anthropologist, Kathy Reichs, who's been gracious enough to join us. Kathy, I guess you're familiar with those sounds. You were one of the producers, from what I understand, of the amazing TV series called Bones, which had a great run of about 12 seasons and almost 250 episodes. I'd love to hear how you got involved with that.
Oh, wow. 246 episodes, yeah. I had been approached by a number of people, and it just, none of it felt right to option my character. And then when I talked to Hart Hansen, who became our showrunner and is a Canadian, of course, and Barry Josephson, who was one of the executive producers, once we met and talked about it, we were all on the same page. We wanted the show not to be just another procedural. We wanted it to be character-based. We wanted it to have some humor in it. And we wanted to do this thing where we kind of reverse gender roles, where the female lead would be the one that's logical and insists on scientific testing and hypothesis formation, typically male characteristics were said to be. And then the male lead would be more the one who relies on gut instinct, and he's religious and he's more emotional. So we like the idea of swapping those stereotypic roles or character sets, and we thought it would set the scene for a lot of good comedy in the show.
And I'm quite intrigued about how the role you played. Were you actually on set? Were you involved in the writing, or strictly as a consultative nature?
Yeah, I was there a lot. I wasn't on set for every shoot, but I was certainly there on and off throughout the whole 12 seasons. I read every single script, all 246 of them, from the pilot till the finale, and I would give feedback, or notes as they're called in Hollywood, and primarily looking at the science to see if it was plausible. We pushed the envelope, but for television, but we did keep it plausible. We didn't just make things up that didn't exist. And I wrote screenplays beginning around season 4. I think I wrote 5 of them. And so when you do write a screenplay, you have to be there to do what's called breaking the story. You do it together. You brainstorm it in the writer's room. And then once your script is finished and it's shot, you're expected to be on set for the whole shoot, which is about 2 weeks per episode. So, yes, I was very involved in the process.
Very interesting. You listen to Life Unrehearsed with Matt Del Vecchio, and that's the voice of Kathy Reichs, best-selling author, forensic anthropologist, and one of the producers of the Bones TV series on Fox. Kathy, I want to move into your new book, which is about to be launched, called The Bone Code. I believe it's the 20th in your series with Temperance Brennan. Are you at liberty to give us to tease us a little bit as to what we're going to be able to read?
Yeah, I like to play around with a different aspect of science, forensic science, in each book. So this one, let me tell you how I got the idea. I wrote an article about a Chinese scientist who had, against all agreements, ethical agreements among the scientific community, he had altered the genome of 2 unborn babies. We now have the entire human genome mapped, and we have the ability to modify that genome. But everyone's agreed we're not going to do that, just to create babies in the image that we want. Yet he did. He went ahead and did it. So that got me thinking about, well, okay, what if someone did this for very nefarious reasons, for dishonorable reasons? So that's kind of the theme that runs through this book. The story starts with 2 bodies that wash ashore in a medical waste container in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where I am speaking to you from at this moment. And as Tempe's asked to work on the case, she realizes there's a lot of similarities to a case she worked on 15 years earlier in Montreal of a medical waste container that washed ashore with 2 bodies inside. So she realized that there's a link between what's happening here now in Charleston and what happened 15 years ago in Montreal. And that's all I'm going to tell you.
You got us hooked, Kathy. That's great. And that's a book that will be released called The Bone Code. I think it's being released just in a matter of a couple of days, isn't it? In
July 6th.
July 6th. And I understand that is just a day before another special day in your life, Kathy.
Oh, don't you dare. Yeah, that's my birthday. 7/7. It's easy to remember.
0707, July 7th. Well, happy early birthday. And so glad the timing for this book. I think many people can use a nice thriller these days. And, you know, I'd love to ask you about, this is the 20th novel in the series, Kathy. You must have exhausted all your ideas. Where do you get the creativity time and time again to come up with something new?
I never run out of ideas. I'm about halfway through the next book number 21, which tentatively will be titled Cold, Cold Bones. And it's about that time that I start thinking about the next book, book 22. So, and I've got plenty of ideas circling around in my head. So I don't think I'll ever run out of ideas. I actually have a folder that I call Future Stories. And whenever I see something interesting, like the Chinese doctor article, I cut it out or I, print it or whatever and put it into that folder. I'm also still active in the Forensic Academy, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. I read our journals. I interact with forensic colleagues all the time. So I hear their stories. We talk about cases. I have a group of forensic women I meet with every single week, and we talk about cases. So I'll never, I don't think, run out of ideas.
And, I just want to reinforce, I think you're one of, 100 forensic anthropologists certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. Is that correct?
Something like that. We may have gone over 100, but some people have died. So I don't know how many of us are alive and still.
+1 here, -1 there. But really, it is an elite group of people. And just quickly, as we slowly run out of time, you've mentioned a few things. What's next? I guess it's novel writing. Anything else on Kathy's agenda for the next year or two?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm in the process of finishing a short story. I belong to the International Thriller Writers, and the organization charges no dues to its members. It's free. So to make money, every now and then we do an anthology and put together short stories. I think the one I'm working on is a short story called Owl, and the name of the book will be Birds of Prey. and it's edited by Harlan Coben. And each story has to do something with a bird of prey. So that'll be coming out next fall, I think late fall, early winter. So that's been a fun diversion to create a brand new character and play around with that.
Very, very good. Last question, just wrapping it up in this age of COVID. I would imagine you do a lot of media, particularly around launches of books and so on. Has this been maybe a blessing in disguise with a lot less travel, or do you miss it?
Well, there is both. There's both. I haven't been able to come to Montreal in, a year and a half, whenever the border closed. And listening to the traffic report, what's going on out there. Is everything closed? Are all those exits really closed? Anyway, it felt like I was back there again. And I really miss being there. I really miss meeting with my readers. I did do one event for Paragraph Books, but it'll be great when I will be able to get back and actually see people face to face.
Well, we want you back. The borders are slowly opening, and I know based on a Life Unrehearsed Facebook page teaser, you have a lot of loyal listeners waiting to see you, and that will gobble up your new book. So thank you, Kathy Reichs, for coming on our show today.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right. That's international best-selling author and forensic anthropologist Kathy Reichs. Her latest book, called The Bone Code, is being published on July 6th, just a couple days away. And that is published, by the way, from our friends at Simon & Schuster, who were quite helpful in setting up this interview.